All right, so we're going to start this morning here. Um, all right, so let's begin by just settling in, getting mind and body together in the same place. Sanda Sankarabshidi Santama Krajabani Shumas. So sooner not to drink his hustle, Kateramanan so on. Umi Chiki, Kipojani, do some Sunday cooking one year on some sugar and some Brazil. The winner shut off so that. Organigin of Chansam Pamekazadam Pulaim, Centrigino Jane Pamagination Sutra, Dokumentako. Ege Suda, Regation Gate of Jesus, so good. Okay, so we want to begin with our bodhicitta motivation, thinking about the suffering of all mother sentient beings, generating compassion for them, and forming the wish to attain full and complete enlightenment for their benefit. So we are on the series of the four mind changes, or the four thoughts that turn the mind towards the Dharma. And these contemplations are meant to help us want to practice. So they point out, you know, various things that should make us want to practice when we don't particularly feel like it, which is often, could be often, I should say, would be often. So, just as a quick review, the four mind changes are precious human life, impermanence and death, cause and effect, and the suffering of samsara. So, the last two, not the last 2 weeks, because I didn't do anything last Saturday, but the previous and the one previous to that, we covered precious human life and impermanence and death. So, if anybody's interested in that, you can go back. It's on our channel, and have a look at those. So today we're talking about cause and effect, aka karma. So karma is a very involved topic, and so we should be aware that whatever we cover in the next 25 minutes, 25 to 30 minutes, is not going to even begin to scratch the surface, but we should be able to get generally a good idea of what karma is about, in fact. Okay. So, beginning with the definition of karma, it's really not that complicated. It's just cause and effect. Karma itself, the word karma, literally translates as action. So, if we were going to be precise, we would say karma and karmic effect, you know, but nobody is that precise. So, we just talk about karma in general. Okay. So, in our culture, karma is vastly misunderstood. It's essentially used as a synonym for revenge, right? Karma's going to get you. Karma's going to bite you. I can't wait till karma comes to, hit you back or whatever. And all is true that there is negative karma, and that negative acts of body, speech, and mind result in suffering. Um, there's not only negative karma, okay? There's also positive karma. So actions can be positive, negative, or neutral. So a positive act is like generosity. a negative act, be the opposite of that, maybe it's stealing something. And a neutral act be, something simple like drinking a cup of tea or brushing your teeth or whatever that has neither negative nor positive consequences or motivation. However, you can make all of the neutral things that we do, we can make them positive if we do them with the bodhicitta motivation and use them to practice, but at least doing them with the bodhicitta motivation. So if I'm going to drink this mulane, whatever it's called, tea, right? I can just drink it like that because it's helping me, hopefully, not cough. Or I can drink it with the bodhicitta motivation. May this tea, calm my throat so I can share the Dharma with others. That now it's a positive act. Mm, good karma, so delicious. Okay. And then we can dedicate, that was a meritorious act if I'm drinking the tea with that motivation. We can do that for everything that we do. We can do specifically like that, like I did, made this tea, calm my voice so I can share the Dharma, this positive thing. Or we can do in general, when we wake up in the morning, may everything I do today ultimately benefit others. That's starting with a good motivation. And then in the evening, we can dedicate that. May I dedicate all the positive acts that I did today. Uh, so, um, so there's not only bad karma, okay? Um, Karma is seen as a natural law. This is something really important to understand too. We grow up in this, most of us grew up in our culture anyway, is Judeo-Christian culture. Most of us were raised in some kind of religion. I know it's a good 75% of Americans have some sort of religion affiliation. Um, so um, we get we can let's see, how do I want to say this? We need to be careful with how we see karma, that we don't see it as punishment and reward, because as strange as it might sound, it really doesn't have a moral basis to it. It's just that's why sometimes we use the word skillful and unskillful rather than good and bad, because it's more skillful to do positive acts of body, speech, and mind because they result in happiness. That's the overarching um, understanding of karma. If you're going to paint it with a broad stroke, it's that virtuous, positive, skillful acts of body, speech, and mind result in happiness, and unvirtuous, negative, or unskillful acts of body, speech, and mind result in suffering. That's the broad stroke understanding of karma. Okay. But it needs to be understood that there isn't a judge in the sky with a big record book that's keeping track of everything. In that sense, we need to think of it as just a natural law. Every action has a reaction, right? Why would that work in the physical world, but not in the mental world or in the emotional world or psychological world? So, I usually compare it to gravity, the law of gravity. Okay. The law of gravity is just the law of gravity. What goes up must come down, right? But there's no judgment there. There's no like, if I hold a pen and I drop the pen, um, there's no I can't say I'm a very good person for doing that or I'm a very bad person for doing that. It's just I held a pen, I let it go, and it dropped. This is how we need to see karma, and it can be really challenging to do that, but we need to very much keep that in the forefront of our mind when we're talking about karma. Okay. The same time, like karma, gravity has no mercy. So karma has no mercy. Like there's no one that you can appeal to and say, yeah, but you know I don't know. I was upset. And so you have to just let it go because I was upset. And so, okay, so I stabbed that person, but I was upset, right? We can't do that. We can't do that, right? It just, we do something, we receive the result. So as an example regarding karma, if you're on a high building and you throw a glass out the window, the glass will fall. The same thing will happen if you throw a baby out the window. The baby will fall. There's no other kind of mitigating force that appears like Superman to stop the baby mid-flight. So in that sense, that's what I mean. There's no mercy in the sense that we can't appeal. We can change our karma, we can affect our karma. And this is where the understanding of karma or trying to get to the inner workings of karma becomes quite complicated. So broadly speaking, it's simple. What goes up must come down. But when we start to look at the particularities, then it becomes something very, very complicated. Okay. So um uh and we'll talk about that, you know, as we go through. So although it is to be considered a natural law, like devoid of judgment, no place for guilt or blame or reward. Um, it's different from gravity in that karma doesn't exist outside of our own mind or outside of our own consciousness. Okay, it's not an outside force. It's a force that exists within the mind. Very, very important to remember, because this is why other things that we do and certain practices and things like that can purify our negative karma. Okay, so it's karma is it's a law of nature in the sense that I just described, but it's not fate. A lot of times people will, like in the Hindu tradition, it seems, and again, I'm not, an expert on that tradition whatsoever. So um, maybe I'm wrong on this, but it seems to me that in the Hindu tradition, it's more considered fate, right? And like this is how they keep the caste system in place. It's your karma to be reborn as a toilet sweeper because that's your caste. That's not the Buddhist understanding of karma. Okay. Um, so there is individual karma and there's collective karma. So ultimately, it's all individual, right? So, like, I can't experience someone else's karma. I can't give away my karma to somebody else. I can't take theirs on. I can wish to do that. It's a bodhisattva activity, actually. If we wish to take on, we form a kind of aspiration to take on the karma of someone else, negative karma of someone else, as a way of, wishing that they did not suffer from their negative acts, but we can't actually do that. So there's individual karma, which again, ultimately it's all individual karma, but I'll explain that. So everything that happens to us, good or bad, happy or suffering, is a result of our own karma. Okay. So a lot of times people will sort of just again like overly focus on the negative karma, right? And then they'll start to feel guilty, like, oh, I'm suffering from this physical uh, illness or whatever because I'm a bad person. That's not how we're supposed to understand it. That's the kind of thing we need to be careful of. We need to understand karma in relation to non-self, uh, meaning like not being attached to the idea of a permanently existent, solidly existent, inherently existent self. So if we look at the present moment where we are right now, okay, our body's changing every second, our mind is changing every second. So, I mean, we've been here sitting here for 15 minutes, right? We're already very different from when we sat in front of the computer until now. Okay. So what are we going to point to say that's me? This is me. This is me. This will always be me. So if we can't do it in 15 minutes, we're not going to be able to do that looking back over 100,000 lifetimes. Right. So we need to we need to like take karma seriously in the fact that it is a force and it is something that very deeply and constantly affects us. So in that sense we need to take it seriously, but we shouldn't take it personally. Just again, it's a little weird, it's a little hard to get our head around, and it's not something we're going to be able to solve in the next 15 minutes. But when you learn more about karma, it's important to keep these things in mind. Then there's collective karma. Okay. So collective karma is like we um we do things as a group. Okay. Like an example is like an army. Okay. So if you're killing people together, then that could result in a collectively reaping the result of that. So but even that kind of depends on your individual karma. So um, for example, there was a time in the Buddha's life when he had a headache. I guess I think it was a headache. He had some kind of small-ish physical pain, and his student asked him, like, "You're the Buddha and you're enlightened, and like, what is with this pain? What's going on?" And the Buddha said, "Well, in a previous life, I was part of this village that killed fish, for a living." And there were some fish that were still alive that were hanging upside down, on a rack of some kind, and they were wiggling, and I laughed at them. And the rest of the village that had been reborn, like together in this life, in another, um, in this present life, and that village was currently being slaughtered by the reborn fish that they had killed and who had been reborn as humans, and then they were slaughtering this village. But because of the Buddha's own advanced practice and realization, instead of getting, you know, killed, he just had a headache. So it's like collective, but ultimately personal as well, individual as well. So what affects the weight of the karmic uh, action of the action or the result? Pardon me. So um um so there's like typically they list 10 non-virtuous actions and 10 virtuous acts, and it's obvious stuff. There's three of the body, four of speech, and three of the mind. So the non-virtuous acts would be taking life, taking what's not given, sexual misconduct, lying, sowing discord, harsh speech, worthless chatter, wishing harm on others, wrong views, and covetousness, and the 10 virtuous acts who consider the opposite of that. So that's sort of the same in whatever religious system you have. So what affects the weight of that is your reason for doing it or your motivation for doing it, right? So um, motivation is considered key. Uh, so, for example, we can do like a positive act with a negative motivation. What looks on the outside to be positive, like being generous with someone, for example, from the outside, we would say, "Oh yeah, that's a positive act," but the person who's giving, maybe the only reason they're doing that is because they want to shame the person who's receiving. Then what looks like a positive act is actually a negative act. Okay. Um, and we can do a negative act with a seemingly negative act with a positive motivation. So the um, traditional example of that is if you're in the woods and you see a deer run by, and then a deer runs that way, and then a hunter comes up and asks you which way the deer went, you're going to lie to save the deer, right? So you're just telling me went in the opposite direction to avoid the hunter killing the deer. Okay. So technically that's a negative act because it's lying, but it's a positive act because your motivation of doing that. Okay. So reason motivation is one of the things that affects the weight of karma. What the action is. So killing is the heaviest of all. So that's worse than stealing. That's what, than lying and all these other things. So what you do will also affect, and then to whom we do the action. So, for example, like um, typically what I say is like killing an ant accidentally when you're walking across the grass is still killing, right? But um, it's accidental. There was no motivation to do that, and it's an ant versus killing your parents out of anger, which is one of the heaviest of the negative actions that we can do, right? So to whom we do something also matters. Um, and then there's the four elements of an action that make it like a fully that will result in receiving the full karmic effect of that action. Pardon me. You know. So though that is awareness of what we're doing. So like with the example of the ant, like we kill it, but we still receive the karma of killing, even if it's accidental and it's just an ant, just an ant. We still receive the karma of killing, but much less so than if because we didn't know, right? Awareness of what we're doing, the motivation, whether we did that with a good motivation or a bad motivation, doing the actual act and then and completing it and then rejoicing, like being happy about it. So if all four of those things are together, that's a fully ripened effect that will result in a fully ripened effect. So any one of those things can be missing. Like we can want to do something and have a motivation to do something but not actually do it, or we can do something but be unaware, like with the ant. Or we can do something and then really, if it's negative, let's say, and just really regret doing that. That lessens the power of it also. So then there's the result of the actions. So I'm not going to go into detail here, just to say, as I said before, skillful acts of body, speech, and mind generally result in happiness. Unskillful acts of body, speech, and mind generally result in suffering. So why do we need to even think about karma? Why do we even need to um, consider it, right? Uh, it's really important to take karma, as I said, like seriously. It is so helpful if we do. Pardon me. Hold on a second, please. Um, um, so if we take karma seriously, meaning we accept the teachings on karma, positive acts result in happiness, etc., then we will pay much more attention to our acts of body, speech, and mind, right? Because we're like, oh, if I do this, I'm going to suffer. Whereas if I do this, it's going to bring happiness, right? So we pay more attention to our actions, which means that we can create for ourselves a happier future by taking karma seriously, right? So that's one thing. Then karma also helps us to have compassion both for the victim and the perpetrator. So it's easier to have compassion for a victim, right? So someone who is suffering in some way, someone who is, let's say, being beat up, right? We feel bad for that person. And normally, well, how we react is we feel bad for the victim and we feel anger or hatred for the perpetrator. But we need to have compassion for the perpetrator too. And the reason for that is because that person is, the victim is purifying their karma, and the perpetrator is creating negative karma for themselves. So down the way, they're going to suffer more than the suffering that they're meting out. Now, it doesn't mean, of course, that we just sit by and just be like, oh, well, sorry, that guy's beating you up, but it's your karma. No, like it might also be their karma to be saved from that horrible situation, and we should try, right? Um, but the perpetrator is worthy of our compassion also. And this is where the pop culture idea of karma is so off base. Apart from only considering negative karma, there's a kind of joy that people have in the suffering of others, you know. I can't wait for karma to get you. Karma's going to get you. Oh, I don't need to do anything, and just rubbing our hands together. Like, it's so nasty, this way of thinking, you know, even if we know that someone is going to suffer as a result of their acts, we should have compassion for them, just like we have compassion for those who are suffering now because of their negative acts, right? It's that we don't see the big picture. If we're only seeing this life, then we're not seeing the big picture. Like, why is there a victim at all? Because that person created a situation for that to happen. Again, very worthy of compassion. Doesn't mean we don't have compassion for them or that we don't do our best to aid in their relieving their suffering. But there's that understanding, that wisdom aspect, right? And then the perpetrator creating more negative karma for themselves. So all the suffering that we experience, like, we literally cannot experience anything that we did not create the karma for. So all of that is a result of our own negative acts of the past. All the happiness we have, the fact that, we have a roof over our head and enough food to eat and friends and love and the Dharma and all of that is a result of our positive acts of body, speech, and mind, right? So it works both ways. Um, so how do we then purify negative karma, right? So there's like the ordinary way, which is, what we consider in our own society. So apologizing, trying to make amends with people, trying to repair. Another thing we can do is to do positive acts to affect. And again, like, this is where karma becomes more complicated, right? Because it's not static. It's not like, oh, here's this, box of things that we've done in the past, and it must result in this. No, karma is not static. It's fluctuating all the time, because negative acts that we do sort of erase positive acts that we do, positive acts that we do, lessen negative acts that we do. So it's in this constant state of flux, right? Um, so one thing we can do, as I said, is positive acts. So, like, direct. There are acts that are like a direct um, antidote. So, like, if we killed, then we want to save lives, right? And then there's just in general, like, the more positive acts that we do, the better. It's going to lessen the negative. Um, and then there is like a sort of I don't know how to put this exactly in Dharma terms, but it's kind of like developing a sense of gratitude for, like, whatever we're going through, because we can we can go through quite a lot and have quite a lot of suffering, but we can kind of be grateful for that, because we're like, well, I have a precious human life right now, and yes, I'm going through all this suffering, but I can experience it now when I can practice with that, when I can use it to generate compassion, when I can use it to contemplate impermanence, things like that, right? So we can kind of have a sense of gratitude for that and be like, okay, now I can work through this, rather than just have to experience it in a future life as an animal or something like that, when we don't have any choice, where we don't have a way to work with it. So there's that. And then all these teachings about kind of seeing our enemy as the teacher, right? Seeing our enemy as the guru, like helping us purify our karma, helping us to um, kind of understand, uh, um, understand the law of cause and effect, helping us to generate compassion, etc. Okay. Then there are like specific practices we can do. And so there's the practice called Vajrasattva, which some of you know, some of you do not, which involves visualizing a figure called Vajrasattva, and then mantra recitation and certain visualizations that we do can help us purify that karma. Why? Because karma doesn't exist outside of ourselves. That's why it's so important to remember that point. Karma exists in our own consciousness, right? is part of it's called the alaya. It exists in the alaya, which is a really subtle aspect of our consciousness. So therefore, um, practices like Vajrasattva can actually help to purify that karma. Sincerely developing bodhicitta goes a really long way in purifying our karma, and realizing emptiness. Once we realize emptiness, all of our karma is purified. And again, all of these things we can discuss forever, you know. Um, so how, again, just going back to how sort of knowing about karma can be so helpful, right? So um, dealing with our suffering now and creating happiness for ourselves in the future. So one of the things that we do when we suffer is we kind of add more suffering onto our suffering. Like, why me? Why is this happening? I don't want to be in this situation. This is really terrible, etc. That's like adding suffering on top of the suffering. If we really understand karma and we really accept karma, then it becomes easier, and we're just like, oh, okay, this is my karma, you know, so I need to purify this. And so I'll just work on purifying this karma. I'll deal with my suffering, develop compassion for others through my suffering, develop renunciation for cyclic existence through my suffering, etc. There's a lot we can do. um, Understanding karma puts our suffering and happiness into our own hands, which can be very frustrating sometimes, right? Like we used to talk about that in retreat, like, oh, it's so easy to be a Christian. I wish I was Christian. Why everything has to be my fault? And I have to watch every thought and every word. Oh my God, you know, it's easier to go to church on Sunday, go to confession on Friday and be done with it, you know. Alas, that is not the case. Um, um, it's a door to compassion, you know, when we look around at all the suffering, you know, to um, understand that this suffering is the result of being's own negative acts. It's so like heartbreaking, right? If we understand this process, it just really can open the heart of compassion for others and just feel like, wow, like we make this mess ourselves, you know, it's so sad, you know, it's just, we wish, you know, that we could just snap our fingers and the whole thing would be gone, you know, that there would be no more suffering. But unfortunately, it's not that way. And it inspires us, as I said earlier, to cultivate virtue, to avoid non-virtue. If we really accept karma, the way it's just like, I really want to be careful with what I say, with what I do, with what I think, you know. I hate that part so much, what I think, you know, right? Because like in Christianity, it doesn't matter really what you think. It's what you say, what you do. That's important, right? You can think whatever you want. But in Buddhism, it's like, no, even what we think, it creates karma. And actually what we think is the most important because our mind is the boss of our body and our speech. So if we don't have our mind under, you know, control, um, then we're much more likely, right, to act negatively with our speech and our body, right? So mind is so important. And it helps us to create renunciation for samsara. So samsara is a Sanskrit word. It means cyclic existence. So what is that? That is this round of birth and death and birth and death and birth and death that we've been on since beginningless time. So we need to understand what a, pardon my French, but what a shit show it is, really. You know, um, we kind of tend to avoid that. We have this fantasy that life should be easy and is everything is fine. And I don't know if you here are familiar with this meme of the dog like sitting at a restaurant when everything is on fire. Have you seen that meme? No. Oh. So it's just a cartoon of a dog sitting at a table and like the whole like room is on fire and he just has like a cup of coffee there and he's saying this is fine, this is fine. And, that's kind of how we are with samsara, we sort of are in love with it and we're very seduced by it. But it really is just a mountain of crap, and understanding karma and being aware of it in a very real sense um, really helps develop renunciation for cyclic existence, which we need. We really need to have it. We need to wake up and realize what we're actually dealing with. So, in closing, I'll just read these two verses from Palmo Rybicki, who wrote "Words of My Perfect Teacher." He says, "Do not take lightly small misdeeds, believing they can do no harm. Even a tiny spark of fire can set alight a mountain of hay. Do not take lightly small good deeds, believing they can hardly help, for drops of water, one by one, in time can fill a giant pot." So we'll end there, and we will do some meditation now. Okay. So we're going to do a mindfulness and breathing practice to begin with, and then we will move into the Tonglen practice. Okay. So I know that all of you know how to meditate. I don't know who's on YouTube, but so we want to begin with taking the posture on the floor. Cross your legs in whatever way is most comfortable for you. You're sitting on a chair. You just want your feet flat on the floor in front of you. All the other instructions are the same. Palms down on the knees or thighs. Palms upwards, resting one on top of the other in your lap, or your fingers touching like that and your thumbs like that. Whatever you're most comfortable with. Back is straight but relaxed, arms at the side. Shoulders back a little bit. Just open up the chest. Back and the neck is also straight, chin tucked in a little bit. Mouth is closed but relaxed, tongue resting on the roof of the mouth, breathing through the nose. The eyes are open, looking down a few feet in front of you with a relaxed, lowered gaze. Bring your awareness to the sensation of the breath coming in and out of the nose, end of the nose. That will be the focus of your awareness. We're going to try to observe that breath, that sensation consistently without being distracted, letting the thoughts come and go as they will, without following them, without pushing them away or trying to stop them. Just try to maintain continuous awareness of the sensation of the breath. If you get distracted, simply bring your mind back to the breath. Please begin that now. you can begin to count the breaths if you like, counting either every inhalation or every exhalation for a total of 10 breaths. Counting helps us to remember more quickly if we've gotten distracted. If you lose count because you started running after some thought, no problem. Just bring the mind back. Start again at 1. If you get to 10 without losing count, don't let that distract you. Come back to 1 and start again. So please begin that now. If you're feeling very speedy and distracted, just you can close your eyes, put your hands in this position, hands down on the legs, make your body warmer, make the environment darker. And this will help to calm you down. You want to make sure that it doesn't, that you don't just fall into going to sleep by doing that. If, on the other hand, you're feeling really dull and sort of sleepy, you want to do the opposite. So you want to look up or look into light, look outside, um, make your body cooler, bring more light into the room. Um, all of this will help you and take this posture with your hands. All of that will kind of tighten you up and help you to kind of get out of that kind of dull state. So nobody can tell you which state you're in. You're going to be the one who has to judge that and make the appropriate adjustments. We're just going to do mindfulness of breathing today. We're not actually not going to do tone. So let's just settle into this practice. So again, take whatever posture is comfortable for you. Take note of how your mind is, and then you can count the breaths from 1 to 10. If you're feeling very, um, easily distracted, you can choose a lower number, 2, 3, 5, whatever. If you're feeling kind of into it and it's going well, you can choose a higher number, up to 21. I would not go beyond 21. Um, but, again, that's something you have to judge for yourself. So let's get back to meditation. Okay. Meditation is done. We will go to say the closing prayers now. Those of you on YouTube, there's a link in the description box below. You can download these prayers and get other information about the site and so forth. So we begin with the long life prayers for our precious teachers. We say these just once in Tibetan. Henry Wewe Kuwe Shinkansu Tendante Wa Malu Chuene Senesi Wonten Singyo Suyi Sapega Gaba Tu Tengyo Shi. And the one below that. Un Swasti Jigme Kimpe Kanglong Yampadu Unkab Se Chansu Se Puntawa Nududan Sanam Ke Nobusho Sechega We Shakin Tasu So. On Swasti Tsilagyo Surgeon Tenjune, Vincin Daxi Juju Pemo, Songzun Natrega Buddha Tene, Lapchantan de Shaitan Tage Sho, Lama Gungan Sambo Suade, Chudu Buse, Masuade, Line Tashin Gila Suade, Lama Dandre Wa Me Pachingilo. The next page, we do the first one in English and Tibetan, the next three just in English, and then the 100-syllable mantra. By this merit, now attain omniscience, may defeat the enemy, wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of cyclic existence, may I free all beings. Sonandi Chanche Sipani, Chobne Nibe Chanam Panche Shi. Egana chi balun chupai sipe sole doa shu. Pardon me. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen, may it never fail but grow and flourish ever more and more. As long as space endures, as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain and dispel the miseries of the world. Ever absorbed in the display of divine forms and primordial awareness, appearance, sound, and perception in the state of divinity's mantras and dharmakaya, may I, inseparable from the practice of the profound and secret great yoga, attain within the essence of mind the state of one taste. Om Vajra Sattva Samaya Manuvalaya Vajra Sattva Tenopa Tishtadrito Me Bhava Sutokayo Me Bhava Supokayo Me Bhava Anurakto Me Bhava Sawasiri Me Prayatsa Sawakama Sutsa Me Sitam Shriyam Kuruhu Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Sawatata Gata Vajrama Memunsa Vajripama Samaya Sada. So before we go, I just want to make a couple of announcements. If you have not signed up for a newsletter, it would be really good to do that. That's the best and easiest and quickest way to know what's going on. We have started again everything in earnest. So let's see. So we do have a self-guided group practice on Zoom. So far, it's only taking place on Monday nights from 6:30 to 8. But we want to set up more times and days for people. So there's a form. I'm asking everyone who wants to participate in this, asking them to fill out so we can find the times and days that works for the most people. And just to be clear, there's no instruction. It's just you have a practice you want to do. You can practice with other people, which tends to make it easier to practice, even on Zoom. So I really encourage you to do that if you're interested in practicing. It is quite helpful. We will have a weekend retreat coming up beginning on February 28th at 6:30 p.m., going for much of the day on Saturday. and then ending maybe at lunchtime, maybe in the afternoon on Sunday, March 1st. So there will be more details about that and registration and everything coming up in the near future. So again, if you haven't signed up for the newsletter, it's really good to do that. But everything's also will also be either is currently or will be on our website. We have, pardon me, we have new classes coming up in March. We're going to starting up our 3-year program called Buddhist Nun from the Ground Up, which you can read about on the website. It's a 3-year program. First year is studying a traditional text called Words of My Perfect Teacher. Second year is doing a specific practice that one of our teachers, Jigme Rinpoche, gave us to do. And the third year is beginning the Nundro or preliminary practices. And then we'll also offer a new class based on Tugu Pema Wangyo Rinpoche, one of our main teachers, his book called Awakening Wisdom. Details for that will be coming soon. We really, really appreciate if you could give us some donations. There's a link below for that. We also have an ongoing GoFundMe. We do need money, unfortunately, even though we don't have a physical center anymore. We still have bills to pay. And, this is my only source of, this is my job. That's my job. So I need to, you know, I have bills like everybody else, right? Rent and car and gas and electricity and all that stuff. So if you could please donate, I would so appreciate it because it is the only way I can live and continue to offer the Dharma here. What else? So I think that is it. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Got a
Yes.
question.
Yes.
Well, actually, not a question. I just wanted to give you guys